yes, let me make you co-host. And forgive me, I did not get your bio. You want to introduce yourself for folks too? And we also have Tracy, who's a part of the leadership team of PWSA, so she's going to be helping us as well, like facilitate some Q&A and help us give us some insights and contextualize everything. So yeah, but first, Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and also PhD candidate? You are done. You were
I'm nearly done. I'm so nearly done.
nearly
Yeah,
done. ABD.
very
Oh,
close. So
yep.
close. I am another month, not even. I really want it done in 3 weeks. Let's get it done.
Yeah, you
But
got
yeah,
this.
so yeah, my name is Lisa. I am from the UK. I'm studying or finishing studying at the University of Chester, and my background looks at professional wrestling through the lens of Thomas Hobbes, and particularly with regard to codified lexicons and languages of codified performance, how we invest in fictions and how we perform towards fictions, and in doing so, what that says about ourselves. And I guess that's where I kind of come from. Yeah.
Mhm.
I need to remember how to use Zoom, so this is great.
Right? It's such a right hand essentially right now. This whole
Yeah,
should be.
right.
There you go.
I think I've got something there. So if I go to oh,
Boom.
let me do this. Oh no, what's happening?
Good old PowerPoint, right?
Yeah, I know. It's always just the way, isn't it? You just suddenly go, oh, how did Zoom work?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to stop that and then just quickly nip over to it. Apologies to everybody.
No worries.
While we're just sorting this out, the ambition for this was to sort of make something a little bit smaller. So forgive the abstract for being slightly not what it was meant to be. Um, oh my goodness, I'm really struggling. I can't possibly make a screen share work at the same time as a Zoom.
Oh, you just had it too.
Yeah, I know. I just can't make a slideshow work.
There we go. And then yeah, if you
Ah,
go
hello, there we
there,
are. Perfect.
that
Let's start
button.
talking then about blood, sweat, and logos, sponsorship branding in the WWE. Um, So, on January the 6th, WWE began streaming Raw and SmackDown shows on Netflix, and Raw saw the debut of a new black ring mat covered in brand sponsorship logos, and the ring mat itself was not in any way out of place. WWE had used the Prime Drinks logo, as you can see, on the mat in premium live events following a March 2024 deal that would span across the TKO Holdings Group Holdings company. Um, but following an image leak of the new mat on January the 4th, fan social media posts highlighted an initial frustration at the mat design, from direct enragement towards individual sponsors to speculation regarding brand placement in relation to in-ring action. Negative feedback was targeted to the perception that the greed of TKO as the new parent company meant that they willingly took creative liberties with a sacred piece of set and WWE event, the ring itself. This paper addresses why design choices in the set or the trappings of WWE matter and who they matter to. In an industry that continues to avoid categorization and the labels of sport performance theatre, every sign and signifier continues to impact the legibility of the action in front of and behind the camera. As but gone too far, and now it'll mess around. But anyway, as Bart asserts in his essay, The World of Wrestling, each sign in wrestling is therefore endowed with an absolute clarity. The complexity of kayfabe in professional wrestling ensures that those legible signs become windows into the corporate practices of WWE under the TKO banner. Making peace with the corporate kayfabe is a process that demonstrates the co-production of kayfabe as a narrative production and the practices of legible investment for the benefit of a codified performative language. And this style of ring mat, as you said, is not unique across TKO. The UFC mat has had sponsorship logos printed on it since 2015. Ring logos ultimately do no injury to codifying professional wrestling as sport. Considering the physical labour enacted by the wrestlers to establish a legible fiction that asserts that pro wrestling is sporting competition, the additional weight of the trappings of sport enables such a fiction to become more credibly legible. The sports arena setting, the bright floodlights, the camera angles and the commentary teams, and yes, even the ring itself become props that codify a fake fight as something more legitimate. Kayfabe as a performance methodology can be understood via Richard Schechner's approach to ritual performance as an active embrace and reenactment of a transformative performance. The investment in such a production makes the fictional have meaning and generates the conditions for pro wrestling to be understood as a sport. As Schechner articulates in Performance Studies and Introduction, both sumo and what occurs under the banner of World Wrestling Federation are wrestling. Each enacts the values of its particular culture. Enacting the values of American culture through fight narratives and encouraging those values to be reinforced by the embodied enactments of the audience guarantees the logical reception of professional wrestling as sport, enabling it to become legibly so in the process. Additionally, the frame analysis of Irving Goffman can be used to interpret professional wrestling. Borrowing an explanation from Chris Brickle, these frames are principles of organization which govern events and subsequently affects the construction of the definition of the situation in a particular context. The legibility of pro wrestling, then, is determined by the ability to understand and rationalize fictional competition through the governing lens of a competitive sport. As interpreted by Michael Ball, audiences are encouraged to frame the presentation so that a common interpretation of events takes place. Here I argue for the application of an approach to engagement in fictional orders that is outlined by Thomas Hobbes in Leviathan. Hobbes articulates that for subjects to live in relative safety and to avoid states of civil war, they must subscribe to a codified system of presentation that allows them to embody legible and compliant personas, to read in themselves not this or that particular man, but mankind. Subjects invest in systems which they know are completely fictional, patriarchal with a sovereign figurehead, but that which offer them protections for their rational investment. And kayfabe works in the same way. As audiences, we know that pro wrestling is predetermined, but we present ourselves as rationally and as legibly as possible in embodied action towards it for the purpose of expanding the legibility of the event as genuine. Our reward is the pleasure of the opportunity to present ourselves as legible. The nature of Hobbes' system is that it is entirely affirmational. Through opportunities to performatively express ourselves, we make secure the codified system that we commit to, reinforcing the fiction for further rational investment, regardless of whether there's any truth within its performative confines. As Samantha Frost explains with regards to Hobbes' lexicon, what is important is not whether the inferential framework used to interpret one another's actions is correct, but whether we all draw on the same one. Active participation in professional wrestling's performative lexicon highlights the complexities in classifying pro wrestling as a sport or performance and complicates the ambition to define kayfabe and what it does. As Larry DeGarry asserts, I think kayfabe is pretty straightforward. It's the truth that's slippery. Our definitions of kayfabe are predicated on the way we classify professional wrestling, and the truth of its categorization as sport, theatre, or performance weighs heavily on investment in it. Attempts to define wrestling as theatre have leaned into comparison with folklore traditions, as Craven and Mosley assert that professional wrestling narratives are told through the same methodology of ancient theatre, whose principal language and props concurred in the exaggeratedly visible explanation of a necessity. Meanwhile, approaches that equate pro wrestling to performance art navigate the additional physical labour and emotional and mental blood sacrifice invested in performance of pro wrestling. Eero Laine and Warden proclaim that professional wrestling does what theatre cannot do, or can only do by means of an illusion, enact violence in a live performance. Considering blood use, The audience in the ring understands that, contrary to claims that blood denotes authenticity, as in performance art, and functions as an artistic metaphor, blood is a codified and commodified sign of the legible performance of sporting prowess and the fictional structures that surround this: masculinity, glory, and ultimately capitalism. Blood, like the sports logos on a ring mat, becomes a codified signifier that secures the fictional narrative of a brutal sporting match. The complexities of defining professional wrestling, coupled with the morally grey engagement with capitalist orders that profit on the extreme physical labour of performers within the fictional sporting context, highlight some of the issues underlying the initial revulsion of the TKO Raw ring. An entertainment industry that profits from the suffering of its performers, that refuses to effectively safeguard them, suffers when signs that should be secure, logos on ring mats, are marred by narratives of exploitation and greed. As fans, these complex relationships with companies, brands, and individual performers skews our investment in and commitment to sports coding when we know the truth behind the performative fiction of the work of pro wrestling. Exhausted by the seeming lack of reward to our investment in what we know is the fiction, we turn on the smallest thing to pick apart because the major transgressions, sports washing, systems of abuse, exploitation, would be to dismantle the thing that we love. I want to say it's just a mat, and I don't care, but really, I don't like it. The issue with investment in codified fictions is that once the fiction is openly acknowledged as so, it's hard to unsee it. Hobbes's lexicon is deliberately posited as an inferential system, when the investment in such fictional orders is simply presumed of the other interlocutors within it, not something that needs to be spoken or acknowledged. By refusing truth for peace, both the Hobbesian subject and the pro wrestling fan earn the reward of consistent, engaged participation. However, the strength of Hobbes's legibility remains that in his model of a societal order, a subject does not have to prove his legibility without question. A private man has always the liberty, because thought is free, to believe or not believe in his heart. Analysing kayfabe production through a Hobbesian lens demonstrates how audiences and fans are able to secure their own investment in WWE's performative system. Arguably, kayfabe as a performance practice asks audiences to affirm the system before them through legible performance towards it. When this is in the active response to individuals in the ring, booing the heel, cheering the face, and the cries, gasps, and pops that enable audiences to demonstrate their pleasure or frustration to in-ring narratives, that investment is made easy. What becomes problematic is when we begin to comprehend exactly what our investment in this process of meaning making and establishing fictions actually entails, forcing us to recognize that the system through which we invest is not only actively exploitative, but in some cases morally bereft in terms of its business strategy and practices. The impact of sponsorship logos on a mat is not about codified aesthetics or legibility of fictional orders, but about what those logos reveal to active participants about their investment. That regardless of whether the in-ring performance is fictional, participatory investment in it affirms real-world actions that may well be entirely contrary to one's ethical stance. These revelations, once openly considered, are very difficult to ignore. Thank you, guys.
Well done. I love it. I
Short
love
and
it.
sweet, but I think, considering that we want to get into chat later.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Tracy, go ahead. Sorry.
That was incredible. Oh, wow.
Yeah, did
Thank you so much.
yeah, let's do you want to do a little Q&A now or jump into mine and then we'll just talk about it all? Because mine very much does overlap with what you were talking about as well, specifically with like TKO and the UFC and all of that stuff too.
If you're happy, let's do yours and then let's
Yeah, for
conclude
Yeah.
sure.
questions.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let me make sure I've got some sound in mind as well. Um, okay, great. Let's get there. Full screen going. So my talk, um, keeping in vein with this combat sports stuff, and this actually goes back to also what Dr. Tate, what AC was saying in the beginning during our academic keynote about the performative nature of Americana and American culture. And I put in the chat earlier because it made me think about how that also now influences like gender dynamics and some things like that, right? And so my talk is pretty much I'm looking at that intersection between like manospheric rhetoric, that type of propaganda, and its intersection between MMA and pro wrestling, especially, is now just this cultural economy of sports entertainment because of that merger. And what other impressions um, are kind of being propagated from this. And my background, my PhD is in media psychology. If nobody, was familiar with that, but I wanted to really first understand like fan identification. How are we building community and the impact that media and different forms of digital technology is influencing the things that we consume, and especially the impressions that this is making on the business side of it as well. What are we suggesting? And rhetoric is so key to this stuff, and semiotics, which all the previous presentations have been hitting from different perspectives as well. And it made me start to think originally, it's like, what can we learn from observing the type of rhetoric that is surrounding sports entertainment? And especially combat sports now, because again, this TKO, UFC, WWE merger, it's just screaming so much propaganda, which I'm going to get into and talk a little bit more specifically about like the UFC and MMA than the WWE necessarily. But I think through our conversation that we have after this, we could certainly tie the two together. So first, kind of a general understanding of rhetoric, right? This is all about persuasion. This is all about the art and the science behind making someone believe you, making an audience buy in. This overlaps so many different areas, right? So it's not just about the gift of the gab, but it's also like how politically, how this stuff is used. How do you make somebody buy in? How do you make meaning? So the narrative construction of meaning, how are we strategically making messages? All of that stuff can be looked at as a rhetorical uh, uh, like science behind how different texts are used between language, media, all of the sport itself. So it involves that kind of overall study, right, of how different speeches or different types of media can be used to persuade an audience. And generally, with professional wrestling, this is all about persuading the audience to believe in what they are looking at, right? So like I said, there's this new era of sports entertainment, and like Lisa was talking about as well, with like TKO and this whole that holding group. A lot of different feelings, about it politically, with different, Saudi ties and boxing and all of this stuff. So it's just really, we're entering like this new era. But I just finished writing a chapter for a book on sports podcasting, and I did a study on Joe Rogan. And again, this manosphere that is, in my opinion, if I could use the word, perverting my combat sports space because I'm an MMA fan. But it's one of those things that's like, as a fan, I have to be a fan in spite of all the bullshit that they do that I can't stand, but I have to be there in spite of it. It's getting hard. As I'm getting older, it's getting more and more difficult to be a fan because of things like this. The manosphere is big business in the combat sports and this new wave of sports entertainment. And these are some screen grabs of some definitions. And the manosphere, it's this umbrella term for online communities that have increasingly promoted this narrow, aggressive definition of this is what it takes to be a man, and incels, right? Believe that men are entitled to sex and women are purposely deriving of it. So this like men are victims and this type of stuff where the manosphere has been united by misogyny and opposition to feminism. The manosphere misrepresents men, that we're the victims and we're denying them their right to whatever they want and blaming women for things. It's this emotional control. And this was a great article, I think, I think this was from the New Yorker, and it's looking at, how this has evolved from like a boys will be boys sensibility, but into like, no, this has actually entered now, quite literally, the White House and into the halls of power. And it's something that we shouldn't be surprised of, because as I think it was Lizzie earlier when we were talking about a lack of critical thinking. If we don't have common sense anymore, that it will always go down to that. And this isn't just on the fringe, it's a mainstream that many liberals continue to treat as fringe. Indeed, its popularity has resulted in part from its claim to territory abandoned by mainstream media and entertainment. But the manosphere built its audience in part by beating up on mainstream media. And liberals may not want to attempt to understand this world in depth, or for fear of encouraging these type of ideologies as dangerous. But with the UFC specifically, like, Trump is their mascot. Trump is a giant mascot for toxic masculinity, and the UFC loves to parade him around as a mascot. This is a guy who gets walkouts whenever he wants with the Kid Rock music as if he's a champion. The fighters love to acknowledge him when he's sitting front row, like he was next to Andrew Tate, just at one of the last UFC pay-per-views. I think it was from like a couple of weeks ago. And the fighters acknowledging him, bending the knee and all of this stuff, and using him as this prop to try and become more popular themselves. And they do the same thing with Joe Rogan too, right? Like, if in their post-fight interview, they often, are begging to be a guest on his podcast to raise their own profile based on his reach as, one of the most popular podcasts for years running on Spotify. So that this was an interesting piece about the cult of toxic masculinity, where it's often easy to indoctrinate these men with a set of beliefs that gives them this sense of identity. When Joe Rogan talks about his opinions about men needing to be more masculine and dominating, these viewers latch on to those ideas. And coming up, it's June 14th. I don't know if you've heard about it, but the UFC is going to have a pay-per-view on the White House lawn. Originally was going to be done as like a July 4th event. They've branded it the UFC Freedom 250, but it's actually not celebrating America at all. June 14th is Trump's birthday. So this is essentially and they admitted it out loud. DC, Daniel Cormier, one of the Hall of Fame fighter, former two-division title champion and commentator for most of the mainstream pay-per-view events, flat out said it. With John Anik, doing color commentary at the last fight a couple of weeks ago. He's like, oh, this is Trump's birthday. This is his party. Whatever Trump wants, Trump gets. Like, this fight, Hokit versus Derek Lewis, that was not originally on the card. But literally 2 weeks ago, Trump was there. Trump said that he's a fan of Derek Lewis. So, boom, he was like, I want Derek Lewis to fight on my birthday. So there it is. They added it there, like, just for him. And this, coming from the actual White House account, which I'm not sure why they even have, tweeting these types of things, but see you on the South Lawn. So they've already started to leak some images of what the construction is going to look like for this fight. These are a couple of clips that I've included that I'm going to play. They're very, very short, and then we'll open it up for discussion. But this one from Luke Thomas, who is one of my favorite, not only combat sports analysts and voices, but also he ended up just having to create his own political channel as well. And it's one of those things that's like, you can't even deny it anymore. You can't not talk about politics when they're literally parading Trump around. So this is a post that he actually made like a couple of days ago, I think, about the UFC and Dana White trying to blur the lines, but it's impossible to ignore.
This organization, prior to January 6th, but doubling down afterwards, took a extreme political figure who should be in prison today, who tried to steal a presidential election, who is a sundowning for brains scam artist. The corruption and the self-dealing knows no boundaries. They knew this about this guy, and they helped return him to power. This is their reward for that extreme political act, and they want you to believe it's really about the 250th birthday of America. You don't have to be so gullible, and I know most of you are not. You don't have to be such a naive person to believe any of this crap. But the rest of them, all working in concert together to tell you not to believe your lying eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, the UFC is Trump. Trump is the UFC. Dana White is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is Dana White. They're all connected. And no matter what they do from here on out, they cannot get back the decision made multiple times over multiple years to help protect an extreme political figure who tried to destroy democracy and yet still might by using a fake elector scheme to steal a presidential election, to say, by the way, if he goes and tries to steal the midterms, guess what, UFC? You're on the hook for that too. What other Dem are you going to roll out then to make us forget that you supported this guy and hope to turn him back to office? They are the same. They are connected. And they changed everything about their business to make it that way. Dana White and the UFC are Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is Dana White and the UFC. Never forget that.
Absolutely. And shameless plug, this is a clip I'm about to play from my podcast called the I Have Questions podcast that I co-host with Kyle Green, who's a sociology professor at Brockport, upstate New York. This is, again, him talking about that natural intersection between MMA and politics as something you just can't ignore.
It doesn't take an academic. It doesn't take someone who studies this stuff closely to see that MMA has taken a big swing to the right in terms of politics and just general cultural belief. If you watch MMA, if you watch the UFC, you know this is the safe space for Trump. I always think about how it used to be the connection between sports and politics was more hidden, but you're literally getting the president and his whole cabinet getting a walkout song after every fight. The fighter goes and like gets the blessing from the president for having won and has to say something nice to him. You've got Dana White speaking at the RNC while he's saying, well, we're an apolitical thing. We can't bring politics into sports. Speaking at the RNC, setting up the walkout for Trump. And then you also have a lot of these kind of new media figures who have come from the MMA scene, come from the jiu-jitsu world, or at least overlap with it, and entered podcasting spaces. And they've been some of the more successful people for spreading, I don't know, that kind of like manosphere ideas about traditional gender roles, or thinking about, I don't know, even being in support of like the current immigration policies, really leaning into this right-wing ideology.
Yep. And the last clip I'll play, and then we'll open it up to discussion because I'm very curious to hear what you all are saying too. One of the most recent guests that we had is Julie Kedzie, women's MMA pioneer. The first ever female televised MMA fight was between Gina Carano and Julie Kedzie. And Gina Carano, we know, is going to be fighting Ronda Rousey next month on Netflix as part of one of the UFC's newer competitors, per Jake Logan Paul. But this clip, this is a tweet that she posted about this card. And again, just kind of hype. Actually, I'll just let it speak for itself because she does not mince for words at all.
If you actually consider yourself to be a good person, one who cares about protecting children and or talks about your faith, morals, warrior ethos all the time, you would not be fighting on, cornering someone, working the event, or even covering the July 4th UFC Entertain the Pedophiles card. Take a fucking stand.
Period. Boom.
Yep. Yeah, I said it.
So yeah, can you talk a little bit more about what motivated you to make that statement? Because I mean, I saw it and I was like, this is a conversation I want to have.
There has to be a breaking point. I really do think, I'm not saying every UFC fighter is a piece of shit. I mean, I think you're a piece of shit if you decide to fight on the White House card. Point blank.
And lobby for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and lobby for it. Yeah, I do think you're a piece of shit. At this point, you have the information.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't coach your fighter there if they're going to do it. If you're a good person, you're a good coach, don't coach. Say, I have a problem with this. I can't do it. If that loses you your fighter, you didn't want them. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you really didn't want them because it just shows what your gym allows to happen. I mean, but I don't know. Like, it's really easy. I will acknowledge it's really easy for me to sit here behind a computer and say all this shit. I've been out of the UFC for 15 years. Like, they don't care what I have to say. They don't even know who I am. I care what they have to say because they are a huge integral part of our culture now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to speak up and say things. Nobody's going to hear me, but that's okay because at least I've said it. Maybe there's some girl on the card who's just like, you know what? I really have a problem with this. I'm going to rethink this. Or maybe there's just some person who, you know, like, is in their corner, their entourage is just like, no, I actually have a problem with being associated. If it's one person who doesn't do it, not necessarily because they heard me say it, I'd love to be some sort of help in people saying there is a way to actually speak truth to this power when it's not even real power, man. They don't. You are a human being, like, yeah.
And sometimes it just takes that to get that thought to start building, right? To
Right.
feel a little weird about it, like, why am I doing this thing? Like, should I be going forward as a gym owner to be like, is this the type of thing that we have to allow? Hopefully that leads to some sort of change. I mean, you have to hold some hope for it.
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't, I don't think I have the power or the influence to change anybody's mind, but I do think somebody might see something somewhere. If I say something, maybe somebody else will say something. Maybe somebody else will say something, you know, like in the same way that I think making a choice to be involved in that card leads to a slippery slope. I really do. I think you're just going to accept
Yeah.
everything at that point. I also think there is the whatever they fucking call the left wingers, like snowflakes or whatever. Fine, be an avalanche. Like be the first snowflake down the. Like, I don't care. I don't mind being called out by people because I don't pay attention to anyone anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of things here in terms of, again, that rhetoric, the power of persuasion, and what the UFC and MMA and this new wave of combat of sports entertainment with combat sports and the WWE, what they're doing. But I definitely think there's such a rich integration there, and it reminded me also of what AC said earlier in his thing, where it's like you vote with your dollar. And so if we're watching this, if we're consuming this, this is the stuff that we're allowing to happen, and it's getting exhausting, again, like having to be present as a fan in spite of this stuff going on in the backdrop. It's like you just have to ignore it, or uh just deal with it, or hey, maybe it's one of those deal breakers, right? Of hey, no more, because I know a lot of people who stopped being NFL fans after Kaepernick, right? They stopped watching after that, and so on and so forth. But that will do it for me. But yeah, let's have like 10 minutes of a discussion, about this. If there's any comments or questions in the chat for Lisa and myself, because I definitely think, yeah, like our things have complemented each other, and we could see that there are just so many different perspectives that have been shared, at least over the course of our conversations thus far. I don't know if Tracy, if you wanted to help facilitate this little Q&A, if you wanted to start it.
Yeah, because I was this great presentations to you both, because there was so much that I was unaware of going on, because I'm always like ping-ponging between so many different things. But let me see, because there's so much going on. But do you think that basically with the UFC coming up, this particular card on the White House lawn, and with our current political climate, do you think going forward, those type of instances may shape future quote unquote storytelling or narratives as far as like creatively?
Yeah, it a little bit, because even UFC not scripted,
Yeah.
quotes, right? Like this is supposed to be, this is the real sport, right? But
Yeah.
there are so many other places where you could see the impressions of pro wrestling entering that space, right? And it's starting to blur those lines where we're seeing who gets a push, right? Just like we would in wrestling. That same narrative is happening in UFC, where we're seeing certain people get pushed because they share certain ideologies. Like they were trying to get the most all-American, wrestler, fighters to be on that card. So I certainly think that, it's only going to keep happening. We're only going to keep finding more and more of these type of, White House lawn, pro America. Like those are the fighters that are getting pushed. Those are the fighters that they love marketing the most right now. So, I mean, unfortunately, I'm just seeing more and more of this because there's no ramifications. Like there's no accountability. There's nobody to suggest otherwise. Like they embody this revisionist and like, hey, what I say is a fact and everything else is just woke and stupid. So I don't see it, unfortunately, changing anytime soon. AC, I know you had a question. Was it for me or Lisa?
Well, it's kind of for both of you because, and by the way, fantastic presentations, great job, Lisa. Some heavy research on
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Great work there, and Tunisha, great great presentation too. It's kind of for both of you. My question, because I'm also a massive MMA fan, and I do think the propaganda aspect of it has become pretty prevalent, and it relates to both in that both are being used. Both presentations discussed how this platform is being used to sell a particular product. And even though this, the previous, Tunisia, your presentation talked a lot about MMA and the UFC's relationship with Trump, I think it's also very pronounced with their relationship with the WWE, the co-founders in the cabinet. Triple H is on the national health thing, despite his, I don't know, polite way to say this, fitness-related health consequences, or the prevailing idea that possibly his his heart issues might have been due to use of enhancement drugs earlier in his life. All that aside, what I wanted to ask you guys about is to maybe discuss how this fits into the broader context of American sport as propaganda. I was at a Little League game recently and watching for a relative, and on the sleeve of these 9-year-olds' uniforms was the American battle flag, where the stars are on the opposite side because it's charging into combat. And the Department of Defense spends tens of millions of dollars every year advertising on sports programming and the national anthems and stuff. I just want to know if you guys wanted to expound a little bit on sports washing in American politics in the contemporary sense, and sports propaganda in the broader sense for that.
Lisa, you want to hit it first?
I guess I'll try and tackle it. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because in terms of that kind of concept of sports washing, and you're particularly in the UK at the moment watching the run up to things like the World Cup, and obviously all the sort of interrelated issues with that, and we have a situation there where you've literally got potentials for changes to the structure of the game for advertising and concepts of really sort of adjusting what's to be expected when people actually watch the World Cup this time. So yeah, in terms of that kind of wider sort of rationality of that, as we're kind of commenting on it through wrestling and MMA and UFC, those repercussions that we're feeling here are going wider and are going further. I don't know if you want to weigh in a bit more, and then I'll jump back in.
Yeah, I was just replying in the chat too to what Egan's question, which relates to about like the sponsors and the logos and stuff, about like for that White House card, like Rumble is one of their like tried and true sponsors that they've used for, which is like the far right YouTube essentially. And that power slap shit that, is also UFC, like Dana White owned, right?
But didn't we just see, who was it? Who was the wrestler who was doing it recently? That power slap thing. What was his name? I forget.
Hager?
Yes.
Yeah, Hager. Yeah, the retired.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, Jack Swagger, that's right.
Yeah. How did he do? I didn't watch.
I mean, I saw.
I've seen him training. Oh, he won. He did.
But I can't
Yeah.
bear it. It's so,
I
and,
know.
and then I'm like, what are you doing there?
Yeah.
Right. It's like, why are you here? Like, are you serious? But so he likes to be incestuous in terms of like what branding their sponsors use, right? Like keeping it in the
Mm,
family. So I know they'll have Rumble. I'm sure that they'll do Power Slap. Modelo has been like their beer sponsor for a long time. But I think, yeah, there's probably going to be some surprises, or, because he's been hinting about, all this. This is going to be the biggest sporting event of all time, and new partnerships and all this stuff. So I'm very curious to see um, what other type of logos or branding they put on the octagon for that. But I see Sol, and apologies if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I know, yeah, he had a question for you, Lisa, about your talk. It's always funny how WWE chasing MMA's machismo for legitimacy ends up
yes.
making both look faker as a cheap
Yes. Well,
emulation.
and then it's interesting then going back to the Jack Swagger thing, the Jake Hager, there's this incestuous relationship between the three. What are we actually saying about all three of these
Hmm.
things? And actually, particularly when it comes to that power step stuff, yes, the physicality of it is real, but what is this that we're
Hmm.
watching? We've gone from watching two guys pretending to punch each other, which we were fine with, to two guys actually literally giving each other concussions. And we're fine with it, are we? What is this? It's and so you have these moments where our investment in fiction has broken down now into an
Mm.
investment in reality, and how do we get that back? How do we go, hold on, this wasn't it? And then the
Yeah,
more we look at those fictional investments, we're going, well, hang on, what wasn't it when we were here? I think it's really interesting what you said, Tanisha. Sorry, this is becoming quite organic, but I hope everyone's okay with that. You were saying it's getting hard. It's getting hard to be a fan. And I did a talk quite a long while ago, um during the pandemic, after Speaking Out had happened in this country,
Mhm.
and all the revelations about the abuse scandal. And it was meant to be academic, and it just turned into this rant about how depressing and stressful and
Yeah,
sad it is to be a fan in this moment of July during
it's
the pandemic. And and I think there's some crossovers here when we talk about audiences, actors, when we talk about our engagement. And are we doing like some kind of labor right now if it's
yeah,
hurting us? And I know it's
yeah.
not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same. But that I think there's so much here that's raising just bigger questions about not only what we do to wrestling through our active participation in it, and what we internally acknowledge and externally acknowledge about these fictions that we engage with, but also what is that doing to us? Like,
Hmm.
what is it doing to our health, our mental health, our
Hmm.
emotional health when we're doing this thing now?
Because the words you said, it's laborious. Like
Yeah.
it is laborious. Like you have to take it or leave it and just be done. But then it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to sacrifice something I actually enjoy as the sport itself. I have to sacrifice that because people don't know how to think or act, and people want to be a dick. So it's like, why should I have to suffer? So it's like I've done a lot of other research about like the joy and resistance. So it's like being
Mm.
present despite of that shit. Like it's actually joyous for somebody petty like me with my personality and attitude, right? But it's
Mm.
like the act of resisting, like that is a labor, right? Like that is an agentic type of thing, like that you have to activate. So there is so much cognition, like we have to be aware, we have to, like, it's literally a utility you have to power on just to be present and watch the damn sport. I just want to
Yeah.
watch the thing. I just want to watch the
Yeah.
thing, but I can't
What
just watch the
happened?
thing.
What happened to that time where we could just enjoy
Just
wrestling?
watch the thing. Like I just want to watch the thing, but I gotta sit through all this shit or da da da. So it's like there's joy and resistance for me, and there's a lot of um from like black feminist studies, like that is just a tried and true like core nucleus of studying that, because everything we have to do is an act of resistance, whether or not there's a lot of everyday resistance, like some scholars call it. But yeah, it's laborious. And so you either deny yourself the pleasure of something that you would naturally enjoy, which then is going to affect your mental health, because, oh, now I got to learn how to crochet or some shit, because now you can't enjoy the thing. No shade to my crocheters in the chat. Or I have to be present, but constantly have to have that activation of like being resistant and watching despite the thing. It's kind of hard, but
yeah, I agree, and I think that, you know, for those who are long into study processes, I'm happy for you to weigh in here as well. Like, you know, it feels like something that has become like differently, like the what used to be like the grueling task of getting a PhD over this period, and mine has been ridiculously long for all manner of reasons, pandemic included. But I don't remember like there being like
this
narratives of like it being emotionally exhausting because of the thing you're studying. Like the object of your study becomes emotionally exhausting in the way that, you know, this has been before us. It seems like there has been a massive jump in the scholarship. And I don't know if that's true of other people who have done or completed recently, or are just in and are finding something new out. Yeah, but I'm more than happy to have other people weigh in on that.
JK will be on Rogan by the end of the year. Yeah, Tyler, I would not be surprised at all. So I think that's a pretty safe bet right there. I think we got another minute or two. Yes, you did get my name right, so thank you. Or I'm glad I got your name right. Thanks. I know so little about it compared to wrestling. It's always strange. Hearing things Dana White as Trump and Lynn McMahon, right? Yeah, like does MMA have any deeper sources of policy impact like that? Other than just being a cultural platform for this type of ideology, you know, it's getting more and more engraved, just like Julie Kenzie said in that last video. And I had put a link in the chat of another video that I wanted to play, but I know we were short on time. It's from another episode from my podcast where I had a Canadian firefighter, BJJ black belt and instructional coach, Stefan Kesting. And in that clip in the YouTube link, or the Instagram link that I put in the chat, where he was talking about performative masculinity and kind of the sexual anxiety that's related to that, right? Because again, this performative nature of things, and that Americana from, you know, the opening keynote from AC and such, and just how much their policies influencing these types of things. So I think, there's going to be, and we'll make sure to, when this chapter gets published on like sports podcasting, because I went into that a bit deeper about Joe Rogan specifically, and the political intersection into combat sports. So I'll make sure to share that with everybody within PWSA once that gets published.